Hey, folks. Today's episode is brought to you by sunsetlakesebede.com. Remember, use the code LEFTISBEST. You get 20% off. And what can you get 20% off? The best Sebede tinctures that are out there. They have them in 4 different concentrations in terms of how much in per dropper. So you can up or you can control your intake. They have it in 3 different flavors. They have some with melatonin. So I guess maybe that's the 4th flavor. Great for sleeping, great for relaxing, great for when the news is got you so frazzled that you need to chill out a little bit, but you don't want to lose bodily functions and whatnot. Right. Also, they have gummies. That also helps. Sour gummies, they're delicious, but you got to be careful. You don't want to do too many of them. They also have fudge. They have Sebede coffee, which is also great. It's slid into my weekday brew for the time being. On top of which, they also have flour and keef. All great products. No use of pesticides. They use integrated pest management. They also use regenerative farming practices that they've developed with the University of Vermont. They're up near Burlington. They're big, Bernie bros, as it were. They are also movement partners. They've donated thousands of dollars, things like strike funds, hurricane relief up in Vermont, food pantries, refugee resettlement. They've a carceral reform. They've also done thousands to give directly. I mean, just a great company. A great bunch of folks working up there. They have great business practices, $20 minimum wage that they've had for I don't know, almost as long as we've been talking about them. They're mostly employee owned, just the all around great company to support, and they have a great product. Plus, they have third party assessments of everything that's in all of their products. Check it out. It's interesting just in and of itself to find out what's in a Sebede tincture. sunsetlakesebede.com. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST. You get 20% off. Check it out. And now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, October 20th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Heather Parton, columnist at salon.com, or you may know her from her Uber blog, Hullabaloo. It's Digby, ladies and gentlemen. Will be joining us to look back on this week, look forward to next week, as it were. Meanwhile, Joe Biden returns from Israel, calls for more aid, military aid, to Ukraine and Israel, also looks for funding for some domestic things, including immigration, but also a little bit of legit aid for American families. Announces an Egyptian aid deal for Gaza. I don't know what 20 trucks are going to do at this point, but
it's almost laughable. It's insulting.
Jim Jordan apparently continues his masochistic tear to humiliate himself and Republicans through the weekend. He might do. Just set a record for the least number of votes a Speaker of the House has gotten, down to 193.
Right where you want him.
U.S. intelligence agencies offer a 100 to 300 estimate of those killed in that hospital bombing. Meanwhile, Israel strikes a historic church, killing at least 16 in Gaza. Reports of a mutiny brewing in the U.S. State Department. Fed threatens higher rates because the economy is doing okay. The FCC starts a process to review net neutrality. Sidney Powell's defense crackens up, if you will. Thank you. She seems to have flipped on Donald Trump, of all people. And lastly, Jon Stewart's Apple show canceled, apparently over differences about AI and China. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday. Doesn't feel that casual because it's just we're all a little bit strung out, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm chipper.
That's chipper.
Sleeping soundly, and I'm wearing a beanie.
And Bradley's wearing a beanie.
Yeah.
He's
really excited about.
We're
this
all
prop.
trying out our Halloween costumes early. So,
You gonna put me on camera?
Oh yeah, well I was trying to get Bradley's on camera because he distracted me with the beanie thing. But yeah, we can just
No,
go
there
to
we
the
go.
normal shot.
I just feel really smart with the beanie on.
I mean, it keeps all your thoughts inside.
I want to see you on a skateboard.
Yeah, it's Casual Friday. Tough news week, but we're getting through. And thank you to everybody who said such nice things about our coverage. It means a lot. It really does. Keep us going and makes it feel like we're doing something that means like we're reaching people in a way that other media isn't. So just want to thank people for all the nice messages we've gotten.
It's really a difficult time, and one of the things. And we won't get into it today. We spoke to Trita Parsi earlier in the week and about the potential of a widening conflict. And I really do think this is getting not enough attention in the media. We'll touch on it with Heather Parton. I mean, I suspect... I don't know. It's conceivable that this is a big worry at the upper echelons of the Biden administration, but I don't know. We got a lot of polling that's not terribly great either. But let's take a quick look. This is we got a clip here, and I generally am not finding myself in. I don't know, a lot of agreement or even terribly interested in what one of the Saudi royalty has to say. But this is Prince Turki Al Faisal. He is, I believe, the intelligence chief in Saudi Arabia. I don't know much about this guy. I can't imagine there's a lot of it that I would love based upon how he's situated. However, this is a good breakdown, I think, of the situation. One of the speculations is that Hamas perpetrated this attack against Israel to undermine a peace process between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I don't know. I don't know enough, and I don't know that anyone knows, why exactly they did this. But it certainly has the potential of ripping open a wider regional conflict. If we are to believe that Iran was surprised by the scope of this attack and the seriousness of it. Remember, Iran was also engaged in peace talks with Saudi Arabia. And it's not inconceivable that Hamas felt like somehow they were getting iced out. I mean, I don't know. All of this is just completely speculative. But this breakdown from Faisal is, I think, a pretty good one, and frankly, like, maybe an odd place for it to be coming from.
All militarily occupied people have a right to resist their occupation, even militarily. I do not support the military option in Palestine. I prefer the other option, civil insurrection and disobedience. It brought down the British Empire in India and the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe. Israel has overwhelming military superiority, and we see in front of our eyes the devastation and oblivion it is bringing to the people of Gaza. I categorically condemn Hamas's targeting of civilian targets of any age or gender, as it is accused of. Such targeting belies Hamas's claims to an Islamic identity. There is an Islamic injunction against the killing of innocent children, women, and elders. The injunction is also against the desecration of places of worship. I also condemn Hamas's gifting the higher moral ground to an Israeli government that is universally shunned, even by half of the Israeli public, as fascist, miscreant, and abhorrent. I condemn Hamas for giving this awful government the excuse to ethnically cleanse Gaza of its citizens and bombing them to oblivion. I condemn Hamas to further undermining the Palestinian Authority, as Israel has been doing. I condemn Hamas for sabotaging the attempt of Saudi Arabia to reach a peaceful resolution to the plight of the Palestinian people. But equally, I condemn Israel's indiscriminate bombing of Palestinian innocent civilians in Gaza and the attempt to forcibly drive them into Sinai. I condemn Israeli targeted killing and the indiscriminate arrest of Palestinian children, women, and men in the West Bank. Two wrongs don't make a right. I've been hearing a repeated phrase in American media, unprovoked attack. What more provocation is required to make it provoked than what Israel has done to the Palestinian people for 3/4 of a century? I refer you to the article in the Middle East Monitor of February 17, 2014, under the title, Israeli Army Veterans Admit Role in Massacre of Palestinians in 1948. Read it and weep, as I did. Just this year, from May to July, over 450 Palestinians were killed, including 67 children. This bloodletting must stop. I condemn Israel's stealing of Palestinian lands. I condemn Israeli colonists for rampaging through houses of worship in the Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. I condemn Israel for destroying Palestinian homes and olive orchards. I condemn Israel for incarcerating Palestinian women, children, and men in concentration camps without recourse to due process. I condemn Israel's targeted killings and assassinations of Palestinians. I condemn Israel for funneling guttery money to Hamas, the terrorist group as defined by Israel. I condemn Western politicians for shedding tears when Israelis are killed by Palestinians, but refuse to even express sorrow when Israelis kill Palestinians. There are no heroes in this conflict, only victims.
One thing that stands out there, I mean, aside from it being like a good list of things to condemn, frankly, is his charge that the Israelis have been funneling Qatari money to Hamas. That is consistent with what we know about the beginnings of Hamas. And you can see that 2009 article in the Wall Street Journal. For more on that, a former minister in the Israeli government retelling that in the 80s, Israel was encouraging Hamas as a way of dividing the Palestinian leadership. This is back, the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, were secularists. Hamas came out of the Muslim Brotherhood. They were promoted by Israel. There are documents that were part of that dump by WikiLeaks or the State Department, 10, 12 years ago now, that show that Israel, at the very least, was allowing Hamas to operate in a way that it was not allowing the Palestinian Authority to encourage their growth as a way of undermining the Palestinian Authority. We know also quotes from that have been reported that you've been talking a lot about.
I have this up here too from the Jerusalem Post from 2019. Prime Minister and Jerusalem Post, not like this is not a lefty paper, I would say, within
To the right of Haaretz.
Definitely, yeah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended Israel's regular allowing of Qatari funds to be transferred into Gaza, saying it's a part of a broader strategy to keep Hamas and the Palestinian Authority separate. A source in Monday's Likud faction meeting said. Netanyahu explained that in the past, the PA transferred the millions of dollars to Hamas in Gaza. He argued that it was better for Israel to serve as a pipeline to ensure the funds don't go to terrorism. The prime minister also said that, quote, whoever is against a Palestinian state should be for transferring the funds to Gaza because maintaining a separation between the PA and the West Bank and Hamas and Gaza helps prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. We'd read that quote before, but that gives the broader context of what he's saying there. It's helpful for the Israeli government to be able to say, this is Hamas. This is the terrorists. These are Hamas terrorists on the other side. And everybody that isn't condemning them, they're human shields. Like, a great way to marginalize a group of people and to continue justifying violence against them is to associate them with terrorism. And that helps when Hamas sticks around. It's part of why they haven't had elections since 2006, and Israel controls everything within that strip of land.
And to be clear, it's not just a question of like those the rhetoric that they deploy and creating that a boogeyman. It's also it undermines Palestinian unity and solidarity between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and makes it that much harder for them to come to the table with some measure of solidarity. And, you could look at it in the context of any other dynamic. It's helpful for SAG-AFTRA to have, the streamers and the old Hollywood, at odds with each other in the context of negotiations. Obviously, the stakes are different, the implications, but the dynamic of dividing the Palestinian people, or at least, separating so that there's two separate power nodes, essentially, is helpful for Israel. And that's what they've done.
But you know what's going to unite Palestinians right now, and why you're seeing demonstrations in Gaza and violence in the West Bank cropping up there, is what is happening right now and what everybody is witnessing with the indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Gaza.
West Bank, there's been 50 Palestinians killed in the past couple of weeks. There's,
they're arming settlers too.
And so this is, I can't remember his name, that Egyptian comedian, but he made a good point. We have we have a word for what Gaza would look like without Hamas, and that's the West Bank. And it's not like there's
that's a great point. Yeah.
There's particularly better treatment of Palestinians there. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be talking to Heather Parton about this stuff, particularly from the perspective of what it means in terms of domestic politics, but also what's going on in the House. We just mentioned Jim Jordan had his third losing vote. Which is, there's something to be said about being a superlative, even if it's not necessarily, the one that you want. Like, we can talk more about that in a moment. But first, a couple words from our sponsors. Hey, Majority Report listeners, do you want to be a strategic player in politics? And we want to tell you about Future Hindsight. It's an award-winning podcast that takes big ideas about civic life and democracy and turns them into action items for all of us. Mila Atmos is passionate about unlocking the power of everyday citizens. Join her on the show as she zeroes in on what you can do to get engaged and stay engaged. Every Thursday, she talks to bold activists and civic innovators to help you understand your power and your power to change the status quo. This week, she speaks to Sam Olicker Friedland, who is the executive director of the Institute for Responsive Government. If all things voting are your beat, then you're really not going to want to miss this. They talk about automatic voter registration and the promise of automation for good governance and democracy. Find them at futurehindsight.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, today, one of our sponsors is Henson Shaving. Where's my razor? Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer. They're from Canada, which I will explain to you why that's important in a moment. They have been making parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover, and now they have turned their machinery to bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. This got asked of me actually recently, like, you got a beard. Why? Well, I'll tell you, that is sort of how it led to me to Henson Shaving being our sponsor. When I grew my beard, I was like, I don't need a subscription service anymore. That is a waste. And I'm not going to buy disposables, even though I'm not using that many, because they're not great. I mean, I got to shave here. I shave on my neck, not that much, but this razor, it turns out that the discomfort that people have with disposables and other razors is not a function of how sharp the blade is. Apparently you can do that. Everybody can sharpen a blade. It is the length in which the blade goes out from the razor because it starts getting a little wobbly. With Henson Shaving, they use a computer numerical control machine. It makes the metal razors extend just 0.0013 inches, less than the thickness of a human hair. And that means that you have a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. And the real thing about this, they got me with this, is the beauty about Henson Shaving is these guys are Canadian. Yeah. So they went out to make the best razor possible, not necessarily the best razor business possible, because the best razor business hooks you in with some type of proprietary thing where you got to buy their handle. Sometimes it's really crappy. Sometimes it's okay. And then you're stuck buying their really expensive razors, sort of like the printer game. It's the ink that costs everything.
Yeah.
With this, you buy this razor once, and then it costs you $2 to $3 a year in blades because it uses the non-proprietary sort of standard dual-edged razor blades. Gives you that old straight razor shave with the benefits of this new school technology. Like I say, maybe $3 to $5 a year, but they're giving our audience a 2-year supply of blades for free. So you buy this once, you have this for the rest of your life. It is a beautiful razor. They have a couple of different models, a couple of different colors. Just go to hensonshaving.com/majority. That's HENSON shaving.com/majority. Add a razor and then put the 100-pack of blades into your cart. Enter the code majority, get the blades for free. Link, of course, is in the description. And lastly, when I was in Vegas, I brought only Roan shirts. I don't know if you noticed that, but and why? Because their commuter collection is both comfortable, it looks great, frankly, not as smelly. You don't need to wash them as much.
Or iron.
But you don't need to iron them. When they come out of the laundry, what you do is you just hang them, and like within an hour, they're wrinkle-free.
And when you're packing, that's really important. It's tough to pack
That was
shirts
huge.
like that.
And I've got commuter collection pants now, which are incredibly comfortable. They're all stretchy, but they look like they're not stretchy. Yeah. I don't know how to say that. They look like sort of like more fancy clothes. They have quarter zips. They have polos. You never have to worry about what you're wearing when you have the Roan commuter collection. I'm about to do the coat and the pants and put it together as a suit.
Wow.
Yep. That's a big deal for me. I'm
Buying a new suit at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
At this point. That's the one maybe I'll get buried in.
Jesus.
But yeah, Roan does not endorse me being buried in that suit. But I will say this, it's not going to be wrinkly.
All right.
It's
good.
not going to be wrinkled, and I'm not going to smell. They got that gold fusion anti-odor technology. But the beauty of this is, honestly, you can wear it from work to something more fancy. I'm sold on this stuff. The commuter collection gets you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone, RHONE.com/Majority Report. Use the promo code Majority Report. Save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you go to Rhone.com/Majority Report. Use the code Majority Report. It is time to find your corner office comfort. Check it out. We have the link in the YouTube and podcast descriptions. All right, quick break, and we'll be right back with Heather Parton. Always got to wait for the Hullabaloo break. Ladies and gentlemen, Heather Parton, writer at Salon.com, also the proprietor of the Uber blog, Hullabaloo, known as Digby there. Heather, rough week all around in many respects. Like, I don't know. There are some things that are reminiscent of like the Iraq War days, but also in many ways very, very different. It feels like. Just I don't know. Just give me your broad thoughts before we talk about sort of like the domestic implications of this stuff.
Well, specifically about the horror show that's taking place in the Middle East right now. It's really, I mean, I am no expert on this particular subject, even though, like everybody else, I've been following it for many, many years, but it's so complicated. And this recent events are so horrifying that it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around it. I'm just kind of overwhelmed. And I think that I'm not alone in this. A lot of people that I talk to, this is one of those issues that is so difficult, so, morally charged and yet complicated. And on so many different levels that it's really, really difficult. I just briefly, touching on the American response to the whole thing. I mean, this is just my personal view. I felt like, in the beginning, I was a little disappointed in the Biden administration and the president specifically being so bellicose. My belief is when these situations happen that cool heads have to prevail. It's always a mistake to just let your emotions run and to sort of give license to that when you're in a position of power. And I saw people like Marco Rubio on TV, going on in ways that sounded almost genocidal as far as I was concerned toward the Palestinians. And yet you see this, the horrors of what happened in the terrorist attack. It's difficult not to feel emotional and try to, find some way to express your complete and utter, horror. But last night's speech, I thought, by Biden, had a couple of really good things going for it. I think that he has, in the past few days, tempered some of that bellicosity and has been much more statesmanlike in terms of how he's approached the issue, that he has been, the fact that he's been acknowledging the Palestinian, state right to statehood and, expressing a lot of sympathy for their plight as well as what happened in Israel. I think that's very good. And I think that in his speech, when he, denounced Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in equal measure, I think that that's very important, something that any president should do. And I shudder to think what would have been said if Donald Trump were in office right now. But I was also, I don't really get the equivalent of Ukraine and what's happening in Israel. I don't understand. I get it in terms of his domestic priority of trying to get both of those things funded, and I can see each of them having the merited argument, but trying to use them as an equivalence in the situation just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. I mean, the Ukraine is the victim of Russian aggression and occupation, and Palestine and the West Bank and Gaza, here. But Palestinians more broadly are the victims of the occupation, and so that doesn't just that. I agree with you that it's good that he definitely has taken his foot off the gas slightly, but it remains incredibly frustrating to me that we're still plowing ahead with unconditional aid, given the brutality that we're seeing and the thousands of bodies that are piling up in just days with no sign of slowing down. So I'm hoping that maybe the public-facing rhetoric signals a change in tone towards Netanyahu behind the scenes, but I have no evidence to support that, given what we're seeing of State Department officials threatening or resigning, trying to express their dissent privately. I mean, that is to me the thing that remains the most concerning, because the more we kind of tread water here, the more lives are being lost.
And I got to say, I sort of had the opposite reaction with Biden. Like at first I thought, and I think it's in part sort of influenced by talking to this Israeli reporter and editor of The Call, I think it is, and 972.
Local Call. And understanding that like the Israeli population not supportive of Netanyahu. I think, there was a poll earlier. I don't know if those numbers have held up. Like 83% wanted him to resign, but simultaneously, near unanimity amongst the Israeli population about going in and essentially leveling Gaza. And my assessment of what Biden was doing was to go in and publicly provide very supportive rhetoric, but privately, trying to sort of tone things down a little bit, sitting in on the War Council meeting. That doesn't happen. And it certainly hasn't happened in the past. But then watching, Jeeps come off some type of transport plane, I'm like, well, this is the leverage here, though. I mean, it's one thing to say, I'm willing to give you the rhetoric in public. It's another to actually sort of just have free-flowing weaponry come in to support this. I also think
that the Biden administration at in some levels, I think they're much more concerned about a regional, and by regional, I mean, I don't know that it's possible to have just a regional war there at this point, particularly, with what's going on with Russia and like this, it is, I think that there are probably far greater fears and that they may be more justified about an expanding regional and maybe even like international, broader conflict coming out of that region than we're hearing about. And I suspect that's like, part of the reason why Biden came in and was like, there's no daylight here because discouraging Iran and Hezbollah and whatnot for jumping in, because it's not hard to imagine a scenario where this thing starts to cascade.
Absolutely.
And, it's certainly within, let's say, Russia's interest to have a conflict erupt in the Middle East. Because Putin does not want the level of attention that Russia, Ukraine is getting to be maintained, I would imagine. And so I think that's a real problem. And I suspect that part of the reason why Biden went in so strongly was as much about that as anything else, but I don't know. I mean, I
don't know either, but I totally agree with you. And I think that that's backed up by the fact that one of the first things that they did, that the American administration did, was send in those aircraft carriers, just sort of okay, everybody, hold your fire, because, we're going to be here if you try to do this. And I don't think there's any doubt that that is top of mind to the administration, to European leaders, to actually the whole world, in terms of trying to keep a lid on this. It's extremely volatile. I mean, there are forces at work in this that have almost very little to do with the actual plight of the Palestinians or the Israeli terrorist attack. This is a much bigger chessboard that everybody's playing on. So I mean, again, that's part of what's overwhelming about this, is that there is a sense, and I don't want to be too catastrophic in my thinking here, but there's a sense that this is a very, very, very serious moment that could fly out of control. And for someone like me, who basically I write a lot and think a lot, like we all do here, about foreign policy and national security and all that stuff. But, our focus in this country has been on our own democracy and the threats to that, and the rise of the fascist right and all of that. And then suddenly you're sort of yanked back into the reality that the world is a very big place, and there's a lot of very, very tenuous arrangements in the wake of the Cold War that are still unraveling. And we still see the remnants of that unraveling all over the place. So it's a serious moment, I think, which is one of the reasons why watching what's happening in our domestic politics is so stunningly, outrageous, that we are unable to be in our politics serious about anything anymore. I mean, Biden, you can love him or hate him, you can think he's too old, you can do whatever. He is a serious person, and his administration is taking these things seriously. And thank God for that, because if you look at what's happening elsewhere in the Congress, it's, we're dealing with a complete circus over there.
I want to turn to the Congress, but give me your take as to like what are the domestic implications. I mean, let's assume just for the moment that, and I think the Biden administration did say, like, first thing we do is make sure this doesn't widen into a greater conflict, and then once we've contained that in such a way, and it's unclear to me that they have, or that they feel that they have, then they start to look at the internal workings between Israel and Gaza, and Israel and Hamas. But that, like, we just need to make sure that no other players on the board are essentially moving or making any moves around this that could widen the conflict. But in terms of the way it's been received domestically, What's your sense of it? Because there's definitely a change, at least within generationally.
Do we have that poll? Yeah, I just sent you. This is really, I think, key for us to look at, and no poll is going to tell us a full story, but this was on CNN. This is a CNN SSRS poll, taken from October 12th to 13th. So so this is, I mean, this may have gone up, honestly, because this was a week ago. But you see here, 18 to 34-year-olds, that's the level of approval of Israel's military response to Hamas being fully justified, 27%. Then you go to 35 to 49-year-olds, 44%, 50 to 64-year-olds, 56%, and 65 plus, 81%. And I from just anecdotally, like younger people, younger Jewish people that I know are much more in opposition to the way that Israel has responded versus the way their parents have reacted. That's just what I've heard from people in my life. But to see that backed up a little bit more by polling and data, you know, Biden has to be careful with this, because this is going to be a galvanizing issue, I think, for young people. And the way public opinion is shifting so rapidly on this, it's unprecedented. And also, there are sizable Muslim populations in states that are incredibly important in 2024, like Michigan, where, you know, I've seen people commenting on that. Biden has to be careful that they don't sit out based on this response if he chooses to continue to go down a road of unequivocally supporting Israel no matter what. And there's just still a lot of time in between that. But that poll was very striking to me. It gives you hope at a certain level, but also spells potential political trouble, I think, for the Democrats.
There was another poll, CBS News YouGov, 57% support sending humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza, and 48% send weapons and supplies to Israel.
Well, I should say, I mean, just also in that CBS poll, 72% of Gen Z and millennial under 30 sympathize with a lot with or somewhat with the Israeli people. 69% sympathize with the Palestinian people. So you had almost the same. But when you get to seniors, there's a 30-point divide. 64% sympathize with Palestinians, 93% sympathize with the Israeli people. I mean, there's a change here, and it is this gulf is widening. I mean, frankly, there's something that I think I was saying was obvious 10 years ago, but how do you think this plays out domestically, Heather?
Well, it's very difficult to predict this. It's exactly what you guys have been talking about. I mean, Emma, you're absolutely right, and I don't think there's any doubt that this is a real sea change in, you know, as far as the younger generation seeing this in very differently than people of my generation. Who just sort of reflexively always would back Israel regardless in situations like this. And, you know, there's a historical reason for that. There's a lot of, kind of experience, I think, that leads people to sort of sympathize with Israel's situation, not just in terms of this terrorist attack, but in terms of history, and which may seem a lot more immediate maybe to older people than it does to young people. Having said that, though, I mean, this has been a long time coming. And the fact that young people are far more sympathetic, I think, to the Palestinian cause and see it in a very different light. I mean, they see it as, colonialism. I mean, this is sort of falls in with their historical perspective on pretty much everything. So there's not really any mystery on why that's happening. And it kind of is a shame, in my view, why Hamas decided to do such a horrific terrorist attack, because to me it kind of sets them back. It sets the Palestinian cause back in some ways, in the minds of many people who I think were coming around to that, into a larger majority that were sort of being sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, because Netanyahu is such an ass, and he was showing so clearly to many people, liberals in America, who might have reflexively been, Israel do or die, we're starting to think, hey, maybe we need to rethink that relationship. And it was starting to, I think, have some traction here in America. I can't really speak for the rest of the world. Having said all that, if you look at the domestic situation, how that's going to play out, I think that you cannot take out of the equation the presumptive Republican nominee for president, who is going to be Donald Trump. And I don't think that any Muslim or Arab American or anybody who looks at what that guy's going to have on offer for them is going to be very pleased with that, or not understand the absolute necessity of keeping him from becoming president, and which is going to be the motivation for a lot of people, I think, in this coming election. It's just, you're looking at a choice between the two. So when you see what, Trump is very confused on this, and I think that it's true for a lot of people on the right, and they do not know where they stand anymore on virtually anything when it comes to national security or foreign policy. Trump has really, kind of upended their just traditional hardline hawkish view. Many of them very pro-Israel. If you look at the Fox News, you see nothing but hawkish bellicosity. Let's go in there, level Gaza, all the usual awful stuff that you hear from those people. But Trump, you'll notice when the story first broke, his first instinct was to come out and he griped and whined about Netanyahu treating him badly, and how he had a personal beef with Netanyahu. You could see he didn't quite know where he was going to come out on this, not because he has any sympathy for the Palestinians, mind you. No one should ever have any thought that he is someone who is sympathetic to their cause. But he has sort of staked his name on this America First idea, not being for forever wars. Everything's a financial transaction for him. Something like this doesn't really fit in with his worldview very well. He doesn't quite know what to do. He likes just to go after Muslims, and he hates Iran, and et cetera, et cetera. But he's so ignorant. He doesn't really understand what the real dynamics are there. And his people are having a hard time with this too. I saw some interviews that really struck me. They're all going, well, we don't want another forever war in the Middle East. We don't want to be involved, which kind of shakes up the dynamic a little bit with this whole thing. I mean, I'm not quite sure where that comes out, but I can say that you saw Rand Paul, he voted against, one of the funding bills. There's a faction within the Republicans that's in a different place, and it largely has to do with Donald Trump. And Trump's answer to this, after he stumbled, he really was a stumble. He got a lot of criticism for what he said, griping about his own personal petty grievances against Netanyahu in the wake of a horrific terrorist attack. But, he did back off on that. And his answer to this is going to be to absolutely go after American Muslims in general. And he has said that he is going to re-invoke the Muslim ban that he had and make it twice as much. And now he's talking very seriously about deportation. So that is what we're talking about when we talk about Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. And, again, it's not ideal, but this is the reality that we're dealing with in American politics.
And let's make this clear too. It's not just Donald Trump. Do you have that clip from the Heritage Foundation?
Right.
This is the
scary,
premier conservative think tank in the country. And this is what they put out. Lest people think that this, Donald Trump came out of thin air and didn't sort of get developed by the right.
The left is calling for resettling Palestinians in the U.S. Here's why that should be rejected. The Biden administration has been the arsonist that burned down our humanitarian border and immigration system. Consequently, America now faces growing terrorist threats within our homeland. The Afghan evacuees the Biden administration flew directly to the U.S. after recklessly withdrawing from Afghanistan proved that. We can't vet a population against a database that doesn't exist from a Hamas leadership with which the U.S. neither has diplomatic relations nor trusts. The many sizable pro-Hamas demonstrations in the U.S. in the past week have shown us that the Palestinian population has no interest in assimilating into American culture and governance, or in expressing loyalty to America or our allies. To import a population of Palestinians would be certain suicide for Americans.
I mean, one watches that and has to wonder,
My
like,
God.
what's their metric for success? Like, how many other, 6-year-old Palestinian kids need to be stabbed by some lunatic for them to say to their funders, like, it worked. The thing that we put out worked. We should also just say there's a fundamental difference in terms of Palestinians being given refuge anywhere else as opposed to Afghans. Afghans have an Afghan passport. They have a right to return to Afghanistan. The moment that a Palestinian is essentially ejected from where they live, they have no right to return because they have no passport, because they are basically citizenless. And that's the way it's been for these people for 75 years. And that's why the issue of a right to return to the country is there. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into that at this moment, but
can I just make one observation too about
please.
that heritage thing that just struck me so much? Look who they used as their spokesperson for that particular message. A blonde woman, as European looking as you can get, and
Aryan.
Aryan looking. Wasn't going to say it, but I'm glad you
I'll
did.
say it.
I was just the minute that I saw that, I went, "Oh my God!" I mean, they're not even trying to hide this stuff anymore. I mean, this is just right up front, and it was absolutely sent a chill down my spine when I saw that thing.
The
It's gonna be
loyalty
very
part.
ugly.
The
Oh.
loyalty, no way to vet their loyalty or whatever she said there. I mean, that, like, I saw Peter Beinart made this point on Twitter. I've been all over Twitter over the past 2 weeks, like, in response to that Heritage Foundation clip. This was a lot of the same tropes that were deployed against Jews who were fleeing the Nazis, and the United States saying we don't want to take them. Like, this is using we don't know what their loyalty is. They may have a dual loyalty here. That's one of the oldest anti-immigrant racist tropes imaginable, and it's now being applied to Palestinians.
Absolutely, and just terrifying that they're being so aggressive about it. And as you say, Sam, it just shows this is part and parcel of their pitch for 2024, and it has to do with immigration, it has to do with racism, it has to do with now this has played right into it, this dynamic in the Middle East, and it's going to be very, very ugly, and uglier, I think, than we anticipate.
Oh gosh, yeah. All right, let's turn to something that is at least there's an opportunity to be amused by it on some level, and this is the Republicans' inability to find 217 votes for someone that they can agree upon to be Speaker of the House. Jim Jordan's just lost his third attempt. He has now managed to go from like 202 votes in the first attempt down to 193, if I'm not mistaken, in his last attempt to become Speaker of the House. I mean, he's now in the record books because no one's gotten less votes in a Speaker of the House vote, and that sometimes has a value. I mean, in the end, we all die. It'd be nice to be in the history books for something, and Jim Jordan's never passed a piece of legislation. So this is it. This seems to be his claim to fame. But I mean, nobody seems to have an idea of where this ends up. I mean, the McHenry, who has been the acting Speaker of the House, they're apparently, I'm reading articles that business lobbyists are salivating at the prospect of this guy even being, a temporary Speaker of the House with Speaker of the House powers. And that's what he's asked for, a resolution. And I suspect part of it is because that's worth a lot of cash, not necessarily in his pocket, although I'm sure it will come eventually. But he needs to be able to do this stuff so that he can deliver for some of these business folks. And of course, Matt Gaetz, I don't know if that was his plan all along. It's an odd one. But what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, who knows? So this is really, it's unprecedented, and it doesn't look to me like they're getting it solved anytime soon. Keep in mind that this whole thing is happening with the sword of Damocles hanging over everybody's head. That continuing resolution is going to expire in a couple of weeks. I mean, this thing, they have done no work. That was the continuing resolution was so that they could do their jobs of legislating and appropriating the money for the budget, which they haven't done. So this is, it's crazy, and it's beyond I think anybody's experience. Nobody knows how it's going to be, and you just sit there and go day by day, sort of watching the thing unfold, thinking, well, at some point they have to come up with something, right? I mean, this just can't go on forever. I'm beginning to wonder if they are going to be able to do this. I just, what's the mechanism? I mean, the only thing that I see as, is there someone who can step forward? Because I don't know who that is. And you've got this group now, and this is a very interesting new thing that I think is instructive, is that Jim Jordan, who has always been a bomb thrower and is, one of the most right-wing members of Congress and an absolute asshole. I mean, he just is. And part of the reason that he's unable to get the votes is because of that, because people just can't stand him. And he's got some serious personal problems. And speakers of the House tend to be sort of, glad-handing kind of people who get along with everybody and sort of rule with an iron fist behind the scenes. What this guy's done is come right out and gone full Trump and said, my way or the highway. And these death threats that have been coming for members of Congress, suddenly all the Republicans are going, oh my goodness, all this violence, and I'm getting death threats, and this is just terrible. Really? It's not very much fun, is it, to be dealing with a bunch of thugs and bullies who are, telling you what to do. But what it's done is it showed the Republican caucus what will happen if he is the speaker, right? I mean, this is the lesson. If you're gonna do what I tell you to do, or the death threats are gonna start coming. And so this is very, very interesting. I don't know what will happen. I mean, it doesn't look to me like McHenry, who is your guy, and I think you're absolutely right. This is the business lobby's dream come true. He's always been that guy, and I think that they would love to see him permanently ensconced in that seat. Now, I did read one thing on Twitter this morning, and I can't say that it's, true or not, because I don't know enough about parliamentary procedure, but one person was sort of positing that what could happen is if they go and put a resolution to the floor today, say, or sometime over the weekend, for anything, for a vote that has nothing to do with the speaker, and McHenry gavels it in, it will set a precedent that he has the power to do that, which would then say that the speaker, the acting speaker, pro tem, whatever, has the power to gavel in any other forms of legislation. What it would mean is that they would then set a precedent that is allowed, that person then suddenly has powers without anybody actually giving it to them. Now, supposedly, most of the Republicans are demanding that this go to a vote, that the Republicans have to vote on giving him those powers. But somebody on Twitter was just saying that may not be necessary. It may be that all he has to do is do it, and if they go along with it.
I've heard that that's the case, but I've also heard that McHenry it was reported that he said, I'm not doing that without a resolution saying that I have that authority. And that may be because it seems that, I mean, if that legislation passes, whatever that piece of legislation is, and I'm impacted by it in some fashion, and, there's a question of standing and whatnot, I immediately sue in some type of I don't know, in some circuit court somewhere, and say, this law is not legit because it was not passed and introduced without, the formal, statutory authority or, within the context of Congress. I would imagine maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But I just want to get back to the point about the threats. I think there is I don't think anybody should make a mistake as to this is the moment. I read Brian Beutler, and I generally like his stuff, but he said this could be he said could, and I think he sort of hedged quite a bit on this, where, the first sort of MAGA, realization or breaking of the thought. And I would just say, like, on January 6th, these people were running around thinking they were going to be shot and it took them about 8 days to completely like pretend like it never happened.
Yep.
I mean, these people were literally
right.
like peeing their pants because they thought they were going to get shot with reason. I mean, because I thought they were going to get shot. The cops who were guarding them thought they were going to get shot. But it took them 8 days to pretend like it never happened. And I'm sure this, it's one thing to do this to Jim Jordan when they know they have the vote. The Jim Jordan would have never won, it seems to me. You see, like Mark Molinaro, 19th District in New York. He came out early and supported Jim Jordan, and I think got caught, like sort of like, oh shoot, I'm in trouble here, because none of the other frontline Republicans did so, and he changed his vote most recently. He's not going to escape that vote. He was willing to vote
That's
Jim
right.
Jordan in, but it's going to be fascinating to see, and it seems to me obvious that if the shoe was on the other foot, because there was famously some people, still sort of like talk about this. If the Democrats, I mean, it just like, we play this game often, like, what if Barack Obama had done what Donald Trump had done, this and that? Just imagine. And somehow Matt Gaetz seems to have been able, in the caucus, apparently he's like universally hated. I think he has no future in terms of like the Republican House, it seems to me, unless there's more Matt Gaetz is in there. But imagine the most progressive members of the Democratic Party doing something like this. They would be on the front page of the New York Times every single day.
Why does Ilhan Omar hate America?
I mean,
why is she
Yeah.
trying to?
Oh,
Is
my
she trying
God.
to sabotage
And-
it from within to make Congress not work?
And the Democratic members of the problem solvers would have already, if they had not already, filed a motion to expel all these Democratic members, they would have already been voting for, I don't know, maybe it would be
Absolutely.
McHenry, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I think they'd have voted for McCarthy.
Yeah.
Honestly, I do. I mean, maybe not Jim Jordan. I mean, he's kind of a bridge too far, but McCarthy, sure. Scalise, probably. McHenry, they're sure. All those people, we know who they are. A lot of them from New York. There's plenty in there, in California too, who would have said, well, we will for the good of the country. And by the way, you're hearing the media say that every day now. They are on there constantly. I mean, it's been building over the course of the last week or so, and I've watched it happen, and I'm just going,
They're pushing the Democrats. Let's be clear.
Yes, the
They're pushing the
Democrats-
Democrats to vote for McCarthy.
McCarthy
yes.
or somebody, on the Republican side, and they're buying this. I mean, it's the most fatuous spin I've ever heard in my life coming from Kevin McCarthy and his people. It's the Democrats' fault that this is happening because they joined with 8 Republicans to fail to vote for a speaker. So this is all their fault. Well, it's ridiculous. It's enough to just make you want to scream. But the press is picking this up too. I saw it on one of the CNN panels with the usual suspects, going, well, is it time for the Democrats to step up? Maybe they're going to have to do some. Maybe they're going to have to, we've got to solve this problem. And one way, it just would take a few votes for them to come over. And
it would also take a few votes for the Republicans to vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
I know. And that's the obvious thing. Hakeem Jeffries has had, 27 votes so far, and he's gotten a lot of votes since January. They've been voting constantly on the speaker, and he's always, in fact, this round, he's, had way more than the other guys that have been up there. So, I mean, it's ridiculous, but don't kid yourself. That is, well, maybe it's the Democrats have to be the adults here and blah, blah. What? You want Democrats to vote for Jim Jordan? Are you out of your minds? That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And yet that is something that's kind of, it's starting to percolate. That
David
maybe they're gonna
Gregory
have to step up
kicked
and
it
do
off
Yeah.
on Sunday in
did.
many respects.
And
But
they're,
it's a
and they're,
good
they're
thing.
starting to run with it.
It's a good thing that they're still blaming Democrats and McCarthy's going out to the press and blaming Democrats, because we know that what kept the caucus together after when Gaetz successfully filed that motion to vacate was partly Jeffries playing frickin' Kevin McCarthy on Sunday talk shows and saying, well, it's the Democrats' fault that we almost came close to shutting down the government when they were the ones that ended up getting it over the finish line. Like, the more that Republicans want to go after Democrats, I think the more it brings the caucus together, honestly, because it's so absurd on its face. So keep making that case. It's just going to further alienate the Republicans from any kind of potential deal that they could do with McHenry or whatever that they were floating yesterday.
Let's turn to, there's breaking news that you said earlier. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago.
It was yesterday.
Sidney Powell, who is Donald Trump's one of the truest believers that, the Germans had infiltrated the voting systems and they were washing the votes in a server and, a secret.
Chavez came back from the dead.
And Hugo Chavez was.
Zombie Chavez was manipulating the votes in Georgia.
He was with Elvis Presley and they were trying to figure out, she pled guilty yesterday, and now Chesbro, who was the supposed architect of the fake electors plot around the country, and this is in the Georgian case, the Georgia case, has struck a plea deal. What does this mean? And I'm getting people are saying Chesbro, Cheesebro.
I still can't figure it out.
Chesbra, Cheesebra. I'm not sure, but what is this? What is, aside from the pronunciation of Chesbro, what does this mean in terms of, does it mean they flipped?
Well, yeah. I mean, in some respect, anyway. Now, I'm not so sure because the Chesbro thing happened just as we were coming on the air, so I have not looked at the details of that case. But I spent a lot of time looking at the Sidney Powell case because I wrote a piece about it last night, and I assume that his is similar. Although I understand he pled guilty to a felony, which is kind of pretty serious for a lawyer, right? I mean, this is going to affect his ability to make a living going forward if he pled guilty to a felony. And I don't know what the conditions of that plea deal were, but Powell's are that she has to cooperate. I mean, it wasn't just a plea deal, it's a cooperation agreement with the prosecutors there. What's unclear is whether or not the deal was specifically tailored, her cooperation deal is specifically tailored for that Coffee County case, which if people have been following this, that's the case in Georgia where they had the local people there. They went in and basically seized the voting machines and were going to manipulate the data in there, and it's all on tape. And that the person who was involved in that and was a liaison with the White House and with the Trump campaign was the brother-in-law of David Bossie, of all things. David Bossie, the big Republican operative. And so he was involved in that. And Sidney Powell was involved with that. That was one of the things that she was directly involved in. So the thought is that the brother-in-law, he flipped a couple of weeks ago. And he, that was kind of a big deal because he was the one who had the information, was dealing with Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell flipped yesterday on the eve of the trial, which was to start today for her. And we don't know yet whether that specifically is what she's going to cooperate on or whether or not she is going to be required to cooperate and tell what she knows in the other trials. Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, she was involved with all of these people, Jenna Ellis, that were part of the fake elector scheme and the coup plotting in general. Now, she was there. She was in that notorious December 18th meeting where they were talking about having the military go in and seize the voting machines. There, she was part of all the planning on this. And yes, she's nutty as a fruitcake. So, to me, I'm not quite sure what a great, witness she's going to make because she's so crazy. But I do know that reporting last night had it that the Trump people were shocked that she pled guilty. Mainly because she's what you said. She's a true believer, and they thought she'd go down with the ship, right? Apparently not. And she's also, by the way, named in a lawsuit from Dominion, the voting systems, and she was the one who was out there basically defaming them all over the place. So she's got other problems besides this as well. So perhaps the pressure was just too much. She decided to go ahead and just, completely tell what she knows, which is very interesting because she probably knows a lot. Now, Chesborough is another story. This guy, it was just revealed, they had wanted to have his emails excluded under the attorney-client privilege, and the judge ruled that out and said no, the crime fraud exception applies to those emails. And the New York Times got a look at them, and they are something else, because those emails show that this is not that he never had any legal intentions of having the lawsuits they were filing actually come to fruition. He says it explicitly that it's political. He says, well, I think the chances of this succeeding are 1%. The reason we're doing this is because it's political. And part of the politics of it was they were trying to get the judges in the cases, the district judges, and then eventually the Supreme Court, they were trying to get them to rule on it, and they assumed they were going to rule against Donald Trump, and they thought that was going to rile up the followers, rile up the Trump people to, start intimidating, and that they could use that, in other words, they were trying to rile up the Trump followers to violence. I mean, that's really what it sounds like. He doesn't say it explicitly to rile them up to violence, but he does say that, we want the justices, talking about the Supreme Court here, to feel fear of what's going to happen if things get wild on January 6th. He wrote that in an email. So I find that when I read that, I'm going, that is, that's pretty clear what the intention was here, was to, scare the hell out of everybody with a big violent crowd. And guess what? That actually happened. It didn't stop the vote, but it seems clear to me that there was at least some discussion going on there that was going to be part of their intention. So Chesborough is a very interesting character. He's involved, he was the architect of the fake electors plot. He was involved in all this stuff with Eastman and how they were plotting what they were trying to do with the courts in there. And the idea, and I think how this affects Trump is that his defense that he's been planning, which was that he was just listening to the lawyers and they were just giving him advice, whatever, that's out the window. He can't really claim that, because if they're sitting there talking that this is all politics, that's not legal advice. That's political advice, and it's a whole different thing. And that's what he was listening for. So very interesting stuff that's happening.
I got to think, if I'm Rudy Giuliani right now, I'm calling up Bernie Carrick and I'm like, so what's the best exercise for me to do in the yard at this point? And trying to figure out, how he's going to live through whatever prison sentence he's going to get. Yeah. Or he's going to he's going to look and see that Trump has not raised enough money for him to have a legal defense. And, Giuliani, it seems to me, is sort of like at the top of those advisors, right? I mean,
yeah, he was the main advisor.
And so, I would imagine that's the way they're building up through this to get to Giuliani. I don't know that Donald Trump's ever going to get in prison, but it does feel like he's going to be on appeal during the election, and every one of his sort of the people that was around him and advising him are going to be either in jail or about to go to jail. I mean, in some respects too, this thing that the whole attempt where the legal stuff was really just a way of creating a political context seems like what Trump's doing with this whole with everything now, where it's like, he's not, his defense is get people so aggrieved on my behalf that I get elected president. And I mean, we're a year out. A lot of things can change in terms of the polls, but it's not encouraging. And, I don't know. We've been in a position where the polls have been encouraging and Donald Trump won. So I'm not sure if that's dispositive, but I don't see anything that's happening right now that makes me feel more confident about Joe Biden, winning the election. Do you?
No, I just think, to me, it's all baked in. I see this as a replay of 2020. And basically, I think the same dynamics are in play as were then, which didn't make any sense then either. I mean, why did all those people vote for Donald Trump? I mean, are you crazy? I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and look at this guy. He's talking about drinking bleach, and you're voting for him. I mean, this is we're still there, and it's just gotten wilder, really, because of all the legal problems that Trump is under. And let's not forget, that and I just want to mention this because it struck me as so funny. Of all the stuff that's going on, and he's screaming and yelling, he's under a gag order in the January 6th case. He's got all kinds of problems. The only case he really cares about at this moment is the New York fraud case. He is beside himself. If you read his Truth Social feed, I mean, he can't stop talking about it. Letitia James, she's a racist and blah, 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 going on, because it really upsets him more than anything else. The fact that, I mean, he's under 91 indictments. And the one thing that really bugs him is that there's a case up there saying he's not as rich as he says he is. That is what has him completely overwhelmed.
It also could really fundamentally undermine his ability to make money, right? I mean, the sanctions are going to be taken out on Trump Inc. And that's he could go to jail theoretically in those other cases. But being president would probably, would give him an opportunity to sort of like to fix those things or not go to jail. But it doesn't look like he can save that company because he's not necessarily like personally liable or in some measure or something. I don't know. I think I don't think it's just a matter of pride. I think he's also like realizes
for sure.
Oh, he could lose.
There's a lot on the line there. I mean, he's got some very, very valuable properties in New York that are up for grabs here that could easily be taken from him, that he could have to on some level he could have to give up, not to mention this huge fine that could $250 million. I mean, that's real money even to Donald Trump, and especially to Donald Trump because he's not as rich as he says he is. And there's a reason why he's showing up at the courthouse there. He wants the attention, which one of the things that really cracked me up that he did was he showed up at the courthouse and then nobody was paying any attention because Joe Biden was going to the Middle East in the middle of a war zone. And he actually Truth Socialed or whatever they call it. He posted, just despite my appearance here today, they're not paying any attention. All they can do is watch Joe Biden head to the Middle East, like he's, it's such a joke. And then the next day they said, well, he's complaining that I have to be here instead of being on the campaign trail. And then 2 minutes later, they said, well, are you coming tomorrow? And he goes, well, no, there's a big golf tournament in Doral. I'm going to be there. So, I mean, the guy is just so out there. And he is worse than he was before. He really is. I mean, he's a lot worse than he was before. And yet, I don't think it will make any difference. I think we're exactly where we were on the day, before the election in 2020. And that's what we're going to have to fight through again. And it's going to be even more disgusting than it was at the time. So, that's where we're at.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It's going to be a rough another 13 months or so. Heather Parton, we will be checking in with you some regularity over the course of those 13 months.
I'll be here.
Folks, obviously, salon.com. We'll link to that and to Hullabaloo. Digby, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. It was great to see you guys.
Thanks, Heather.
All right, folks. I think we're going to just head into the fun half.
Yeah.
And
we're switched. I don't know why that happened. This is not how things are supposed to look. I don't know why you're on the other side. See?
Wait, what happened?
We're looking at each other, but now you're looking. No, well, I'm trying to demonstrate.
I know. I'm looking at you.
This is where we're
very weird, very strange. But folks, it's your support that makes the show possible.
I don't like this at all. This is very disorienting. Yes. Thank you.
There
Bradley.
we go.
Oh my God.
There we go. It's your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you get the fun half. And you get the accoutrement associated with the privileges of a fun halfer, a member of the show. I am the show in the fun half.
Want to say words like accoutrement and be a sophisticated person?
There you go.
You can learn.
I'm not
some of
even
that.
100% sure I know what accoutrement means,
Yeah.
but I do know ment in French is mont.
Okay.
Folks, also, Just Coffee. Or Just Cafe. I don't know. I don't know. Just Coffee .coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off. They get a majority report blend too. People love that blend. JustCoffee.coop. Emma, ESVN. What's happening?
Gave our picks against the spread on Thursday. Talked a bit about the Aces going back to back in the WNBA, and it's been a pretty exciting few years, I would say, for women's basketball. And Bradley and I were heating up, so let's see if we can keep going this week. YouTube.com/ESPN show, and we have Matt returning to tell us what's happening on Left Reckoning.
Left Reckoning. We had two nurses from Robert Wood Johnson, the strike, which is now in, I believe, its 78th day, talking about the struggle to have hospitals properly staff their floors with nurses in order to save lives, instead preferring to save money. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning for that.
646-257-3920. We'll try and get some phone calls today. Bye-bye. See you, fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder, what a fucking nightmare.
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
and the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African, and the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the famous fun half of the Majority Report. I don't like it. Like when I get like that
I'm too close
Warner
now.
Brothers haircut. I don't like that. Yeah, we got to go back just a little bit. There we go.
Warner Brothers haircut.
That is what they. I think that's what they used to call it. I think it was Warner Brothers haircut.
Oh, I see.
Every studio back in the day had their sort of like signature shot. And with Warner Brothers, the framing was always like you were like that a little bit. You always had a haircut a little bit.
Why?
That was just the style in which like their people
To cut off part of your
Yeah, I mean
body?
it's not so strange. Not so strange to have like that going. I mean, it's just it's a stylistic choice. The strange part is
I want to leave like 5
trying to
feet of headroom.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like headroom, that's kind of
I like a little bit of headroom, but not a lot of headroom.
right. But the point is that the Warner Brothers haircut. Now I'm so much bigger than you. When you whatever.
We go back just a little bit there.
All right. But I
Probably
don't.
easy for me to adjust it in the software, but
Okay. Well, I just don't understand why Warner Brothers would choose to
It was
be
a
as their
stylistic-
stylistic choice, right? To differentiate themselves. Okay, well
Everybody's got a
they've
stylistic
lost.
choice. I mean-
Their approach, the
Well-
Warner Brothers haircut, is in the dustbin
No,
of
I'm
history.
talking about the
DVD of
70s. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
well.
this is a different era.
Well, they lost the marketplace of ideas. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm not convinced that that's the case either. Sorry.
It's psychotic.
All right, let's just open up the phones and 646-257-3920 is the number. Give folks, if you've been on recently, and maybe give a little bit of opportunity for some newbies to call in at 646-257-3920. What should we play here first? Let's do this. Would be a fun way of doing this. Donald Trump mad that nobody is covering his case down in New York because people are paying attention to the people who are flipping on him in Georgia, and people are paying attention to this Israeli sort of a bombardment of Gaza and the Hamas attack in Israel and the potential of a ground war and a larger regional conflict. And then, of course, in Washington, the failure of the Republican Party to be able to literally do anything. They have shut it all down. Here is Donald Trump, and you're not going to believe what Donald Trump is looking out the region and saying, we've got a problem. Somebody should craft some type of deal that would take Iranian nukes off the table.
Deal, it's a rigged court, and I'll tell you, it's a disgrace for the state of New York. You want to maybe ask a question about Israel, I understand. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. President. Israel is top of mind. You said you were thinking of going. What are you going to do when you're there? Are you going to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu? And what would you say to him regarding Gaza?
Well, the first thing I think you should do is let them figure out what's happening. They're fighting a war. And I know it was helpful, but I think if you take your eye off the ball, they can't be worrying about me and fighting a war. They have to fight, and even having Biden over there right now, I don't think it's a very constructive thing. Because they're in the middle of a war. They're fighting a war. That's a war. And it should have never happened. It would have never happened with me. Iran's leading it, and it wouldn't have happened with me. And it didn't, by the way. It never did it? I was there a long time, 4 years. It didn't, and it never came close. That this happened is shocking. That they allowed this to happen is shocking. Iran would have never done that to me. And they were all set. They would have...
Pause it for 1 second. I just want to be clear on what Donald Trump is saying here, that this was an Iranian attack on... It wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump was president. He would have stopped Iran from doing this with Hamas somehow. Like, I mean, it's impressive.
Assassinate another general, maybe?
It's just, but the idea, I mean, the idea that Donald Trump thinks this is Iran doing this to Joe Biden is also bat crap crazy.
he's running with that Wall Street Journal piece that has now, like, basically, which they rushed to publish after Hamas attacked those Israeli civilians, saying that Iran was in coordination. And now there have been subsequent reports saying intelligence doesn't seem to have any evidence of that, but the lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets his pants on. And like what that article was there to do was to give a guy like Trump this talking point, and the rest of Republicans.
Good.
Never done that to me, and they were all set. They would have had a deal. Would have said 2 weeks from the election, I would have had a deal with Iran not to have a nuclear weapon. They would not have had a nuclear weapon, and that would have happened quickly. You would have never seen this happening. It's being led by Iran, and you would have never seen this happen.
Hold on. Pause it. I just want to make sure I heard what he said. Did he say 2 weeks after which election? After the 2020 election? Okay. Just so that you know, we did have a deal with Iran to not have a nuclear weapon. And there was a president who pulled us out of the deal. Let me see if I can come out. I'm going to Google while we hear Donald Trump talk about it.
Weeks from the election, I would have had a deal with Iran not to have a nuclear weapon. They would not have had a nuclear weapon. And that would have happened quickly. You would have never seen this happening. It's being led by Iran, and you would have never seen this happen. You wouldn't have seen Ukraine happen either. All right. You had something about the fact that...
All right, now he's going back to the other question that he clearly had prepared for. I in a million years, I can't even understand what the hell he's saying here. Did he forget that he unilaterally pulled out of the Iran deal and completely scuttled it?
Yes. Well, not forget, but he believed probably the Boltons of the world telling him that the deal was a bad deal and that they were secretly in violation of it anyway, which, by the way, Netanyahu, remember when he had that PowerPoint presentation accusing Iran of that? He just buys into the conspiracy theory, right?
I can't even begin to imagine what's going on in his brain, but if he gets away with that, it's shocking.
I mean, I think he saw that it was a deal that Obama did, and he's like, get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. Anyway, someone should have thought of something to make these guys agree to not get a nuke.
Calling from a 424 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Greg from Philadelphia.
Greg from Philadelphia. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Emma played... I'm sorry, I'm just picking up a sandwich right now. Emma played a clip from Barnaby Rayner, I think, yesterday. And I thought it maybe...
That was kind of Matt's...
Yes.
I hadn't
From
seen it,
who?
but Matt played
Barnaby Rayner from Novara Media.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And I just thought it might be a good opportunity to call up and give your listeners some sort of context to the shit show that is British politics right now. Keir Starmer's reaction to Israel has been sort of morally bankrupt, and he's had his stooges go on TV, and has had David Lammy, who worked in some capacity with Obama, come on an interview and say, I want to be foreign minister one day, and I need to be neutral on this stuff, while at the same time refusing to accept that collective punishment is a war crime. Keir Starmer is supposed to be a humanitarian lawyer, and came out straight away and said that I stand with Israel. They have the right to defend themselves in whichever way they choose. Keir Starmer is obviously got into power through Labour by kind of making these 10 pledges, and he's sort of systematically dropped those pledges as time has gone on. He made those 10 pledges because he knew that would give him the support of the left. He's dropped those pledges. He's sort of kind of morally bankrupt, and he's actually kind of been embarrassed at this point now because, he's actually, I think he's been surprised by the sort of conciliatory tone that Biden, obviously not adequate, has taken, and has had to sort of rein that back a little bit. But I just wanted to sort of I think pull up maybe Matt's criticism of Navarra by saying that they're not being courageous enough on Palestine. I have the displeasure of sort of listening in on both sides of the Atlantic in terms of politics, and I listen to you guys. I'm a paid up member, and also listen to a lot to Navarra, and they've really taken exactly the same tone as you guys. They've been unequivocal in their criticism of Israel. And I guess the last point I want to make on Starmer, he is going to become prime minister in the UK. He's going to come in because everyone's sick of the Tories, the 12 years of Tory rule. But he's going to come in on a pledge that we're not going to be as bad as the other guys. And that's obviously extremely worrying because he's going to tinker around the edges, not do anything. And the right wing of the UK is absolutely waiting in the wings. So when he gets into power and does absolutely nothing, we're going to have a very scary situation in the UK. So really, really, really dislike Starmer. And I also wanted to just get sort of Matt's reaction on that. And I wanted to make perhaps his criticism of Navarro on this maybe stems from Michael Walker, who is the presenter, who often takes quite a kind of devil's advocate, neutral position as a presenter. But he's also been extremely critical of
Carl,
of Israel.
I appreciate that perspective, caller.
Thank you.
I just want to ask. I'm curious because I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. My perspective on the Navarro stuff basically stems from the Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitism stuff from a few years ago, and I thought they could have been a bit more forceful. But I do want to give them credit because I like you're saying, I think they have been doing a lot of good work on this.
Yeah, Matt, I've actually heard that criticism as well, and if you wouldn't mind, if I could just address that real quick, and I won't take up too much of your time.
Very quick.
I think that I think that the left in the UK were completely devastated by the Corbyn situation and by losing. I think that there was an element of, because Starmer came in with these pledges that kind of kept the right quiet, the left quiet. I think there was an element of all right, let's give this guy a chance. I think that's possibly the reason why they were slightly less critical of Starmer from the start.
Gotcha.
Very, very critical of the way that he's purged the left, and everyone is absolutely devastated and still hurting from the Corbyn loss.
All right, appreciate the call. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People writing in, that's a very strange Philadelphia accent.
Yeah, it was great to hear from him on that. Even though his phone was a little bit noisy, but it does seem like Labor is in a much worse position than the Democratic Party.
On a lot of these debates, whether it's the trans stuff or Israel-Palestine.
They were successful in beating back the left with the Corbyn expulsion. And
a lot of expulsion of a lot of other people on this what we're talking about, the European Commission on Human Rights, which conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism.
Calling from an 810 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, good gracious. That must be me.
I think it is. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It is. Good afternoon. My name is Chadwick. I'm in Detroit. Hello, friends.
Chadwick from Detroit. What's on your mind?
Well, I guess I'm just going to right off the bat. Do you guys know who Oleg Deripaska is?
The Ukrainian billionaire. Fill me in.
He's a Russian national billionaire operating in Ukraine right now. He's a materials tycoon, aluminum and steel.
Yeah, I mean, I know he was he working with Manafort a little bit, and I can't remember the details, but yes, I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah, I've been reading a bunch of stuff for the last couple of years, like I think all of us have, and there's a pretty direct through line that connects Oleg Deripaska to a bunch of money in Qatar, which attaches him directly to Jared Kushner, which attaches everything directly to Saudi Arabia. There's a bunch of efforts that are very clearly in the effort of assisting the efforts to own Ukraine now, and it really seems like, oh boy, I don't I don't want to be some awful conspiracy theorist here, so please just bat me down and tell me that I'm wrong. But what we're seeing happening right now in Israel, is it at all possible that we might have, surreptitious third parties that are potentially helping stir this pot? Is there any, am I a crazy person?
Well, I don't know, maybe, but I don't. I mean, like
sure.
Look, I don't. The funding that Hamas may get, I would imagine there is a lot of different sort of agendas at play. You have Israel sort of like helping with that to deliver that money. I mean,
yeah.
So who knows? I think it's.
It all just comes to a head so perfectly right here.
Well, but
it's maddening.
Yeah, but I don't listen. I think if you're a billionaire and you have interests, you put money all across the board. You walk up to that roulette table and you go like, yeah, I'm gonna put it down on almost every single square here because I can.
Sure.
And I want it to, I have some outcomes that I really want, and then some others that I'm willing to expend money on, even if it doesn't pay off that big. And so who knows? But I also don't think that anybody suspected that Hamas would have been this successful in their terror campaign there. That's, I don't think the Israelis thought that. I don't think that Hamas thought that they would be in a position to do, to wreak so much horror on Israel. So I don't know, but I think it's fairly obvious that Hamas does not want any type of peace accord. It's fairly obvious that Hamas was sort of inviting Israel to come in and do this, and Israel has taken the bait. Hard for them to avoid doing something and responding. But I mean, it's really a question of how much are you going to make innocent civilians pay? So I don't know, but I think there's enough. Let's put it this way. There's enough clear motivation, first order motivation, that we don't need to go and look at second and third and fourth order stuff to understand what's going on. But I appreciate the call.
All right, fair enough. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Calling from a 586 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I think that's me.
It is you. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this Blake from Detroit, another Detroit person.
Two Detroiters in a row.
Yeah, for sure. I had a couple things that I wanted to say about the approach, the left takes as far as using aggression. As far as even just debate strategy or political strategy. But somebody like Ron DeSantis, right? He talks about the stuff, the border and people being shot at the border and taking out drug dealers. Okay, if you get caught at the border with a pack and you got drugs in it, it's a system in place for that already.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What is it like? How does that work, Ron DeSantis? You know what I'm saying? So if you see somebody with a book bag, you just start shooting. Because if they're checked and they're investigated and they got drugs, it's a system in place for that. So Dora the Explorer, if Dora the Explorer came to the border, she gonna get shot? She got a book bag. You know what I'm saying? How does that work, Ron DeSantis? And I've seen him bring this up multiple times without being pushed on it. You know what I'm saying? I'm from the hood, bro. Any threat to, I know drug dealers. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like that would just be something a dictator type dude would only use for the border. That shit would transition to the neighborhood too. You know what I'm saying? That's just how I feel. But when you have somebody like that, with me, from my upbringing, we don't play that shit. Threats to us, threats to our safety. Not saying drug dealers, but just people in general. The dictator state of mind needs to be checked. And when I say the whole freedom of speech thing, somebody called in yesterday to you guys and they was talking about freedom of speech and stuff. It's not an infringement on your freedom of speech to go to tell news, to charge news people and politicians for lying on TV. That's not an infringement on your freedom of speech.
No.
That shit should not be legal. You know what I'm saying? It should be rules against that. Even if it's short period, you lie as a politician, go sit in jail for 1 month. You know what I'm saying? It could be reasonable ways of discipline for when those things happen. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's hard because then the argument becomes, who makes that assessment and whatnot.
But I'll say when it comes to elections, like the Argentinians have a guy, Milei, I think it is. He's running the Bolsonaro-Trump playbook. Like there's an electoral conspiracy against this. I don't think you should be allowed to say that as a politician. And I think like to the extent that we should have governing bodies and look, this is a risky proposition because the Republicans are going to say like in 2000, right? If you question the 2000 election, we're going to throw you in jail.
Right.
Okay, but I think when it comes to people, when people have the things in front of them to see the actual facts, because Fox News, they don't tell no truths at all. All of that whole side of news, of like news networks, they lie. As a person in a position of power, if you got on TV and you just had a big ass video screen in the back and just showing them multiple lies from Ted Cruz, from Matt Gaetz, all these garbage ass people that I feel like somebody that's coming in an aggressive from an aggressive point of view was just like I can't be in the same room with Matt Gaetz, bro. Like as debate,
but you touched on it, caller. You touched on it because I mean, when you say Fox News lies all the time, the role of the media in the way that we've constructed like our government, right, or at least what it's supposed to be, is a check on those lies. But Fox is able to lie to back up these claims, and that's in part because they've been so aggressively deregulated over the past few decades. So my answer to you would be it's more about getting our media and like honestly certain probably FTC manners of looking into some of this stuff and making it so that the media is stronger to call this out because it's too difficult to police what the lies of the politicians are saying. And I think they're more likely to lie because of the way that we've allowed our, media conglomerates to be so deregulated. That's my answer to you.
True. All right, I get that. Okay. All right. Another thing I did, if we still got time, I did want to speak.
Could be very quick. Very quick.
Okay, like misinformation in the neighborhood, in like black neighborhoods, because the people who in black neighborhoods who are informed on politics are well informed, and the people who are not talk the most. You know what I'm saying? Like, the people who are uninformed on politics just run their mouth so damn much. And it gets to the point where I have heated debates with people who are uninformed. I had a dude tell me that Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. The dude was aware that Ronald Reagan was the reason for the trickle-down effect and all that stuff. But he said Ronald Reagan was a Democrat.
Reagan was a Democrat, but just like 30 years, but not before he entered politics. He was a Democrat. When he was an actor, he was actually the president of the SAG. And that was before SAG and AFTRA combined. And then he got paid, I think it was by, I want to say Westinghouse or General Electric. I can't remember exactly who it was. And he went around the country basically going in and arguing against single-payer health care. And started his trajectory as a Republican. And if I remember correctly, that was like early 60s. I think that started with him. But he was at one point a Democrat, but never when he was in elected office.
Right. And I doubt that dude was aware of that. But
I would agree. But, I'll tell you this week in terms of like Israel and Gaza, I've had multiple conversations with people who have very strong opinions. And then within it takes me about 90 seconds to talk to them. And I realize you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And in this instance, it's like they're advocating for really I don't want to mischaracterize what they said up at least that first 90 seconds, but people are willing to advocate, sort of like near genocide. And I'm not suggesting that there isn't full genocide that is being advocated, but I'm saying in my conversations, really sort of some vile stuff. And then it takes 90 seconds and I realize like you don't know even the most basic effects of what you're talking about.
And the thing that's worse is they don't even care.
Well, then it becomes, my experience has been like, well, whatever. And,
or you support Hamas.
There's a lot of vibes going on that aren't very good, but I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Sam. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah, the thing about the vibes thing that bothers me the most is how uncritical people are about their assumptions about which people deserve their sympathy and to listen to. Words are escaping me a little bit right now, but like it's basically a lot of Islamophobia that people just never seemingly reckoned with in the wake of 9/11. And they just have these assumptions about Palestinians and what terrorism really means that end up just being basically like, it's just racism. And that's the thing that bothers me the most right now about the response and how few people seem to care about the children dying versus the Israeli children dying, and how babies are supposed to be the thing that we can all agree we're trying to protect. Like even conservatives pretend that they're protecting babies with their anti-abortion stuff. But then when it comes down to it, conservatives and even some good liberals, they do see some babies as more worthy of protection than others. And that to me has like been the most depressing thing about all of this.
I mean, that's where I think you begin to see the inherent sort of supremacy embedded in Zionism. And certainly in the way that it's practiced now. Let's put it that way. Distraction tactic. Sam, as a longtime 3-year subscriber, please hear me out. Genuinely curious what makes you repeatedly call Hamas a terrorist organization. It was a terrorist attack, and like any other violent militia which goes off the rails, those perpetrated it should be brought to justice. But calling Hamas tags that mainstream media and Israel lobby wants us to call them a distraction and blunts our attack needed for the rights of Palestinians, their resistance group with extreme sections, DVR. Well, I mean, I think I've gone back and forth in saying, Hamas militant group and terrorist group. I mean, Hamas also provides social services to some degree. They're also, not terribly democratic, in terms of like having elections and whatnot. They're also a fervent religious fundamentalist group. You could say also they're an Islamist, group, as it were. I mean, I think right now the reason why we're talking about Hamas is because they just committed a really big terrorist attack. And this was not like a rogue faction of Hamas. You're talking about maybe 30 to 40,000, people who consider them part of Hamas, and maybe that's who would be fighters. I don't know that they're always functioning in that way, but that is their, the militant group, I guess, armed fighters, 30, 40,000 maybe. And there was at least, 1,500 were killed in Israel, and some amount fled Israel, obviously with hostages. So I don't know how many, actually crossed the border. It was 7,000, 5,000, 3,000, 2,000. I don't know. I mean, so I think I'm not worried about Hamas's, reputation per se. It is definitely born out of two things. Hamas was born out of three things, right? It was born out of like an extreme fundamentalist group. It was midwifed in many respects by Israel as a counterbalance to Fatah and the ultimately the Palestinian Authority, and it's born out of an oppressed people who are trying to liberate themselves. So sometimes people say it's not complicated in the context of like Hamas. It is complicated, and it serves multiple different functions. I think when you're engaging in this conversation at this time, my rhetoric will shift depending on the context, frankly. And if I want to convince people who otherwise are not convinced in the humanity of Palestinian people, to have to litigate the nuances of Hamas as, in the context of what I do on this program, it does not seem to be a worthwhile project in that respect. It just doesn't. Maybe at a different time it makes more sense, but that's why. Best is leftist. Sam, have you talked to any of your friends in the entertainment industry and encouraged them to speak out? I was disappointed to see Sarah Silverman post some ignorant things lately. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been terribly excited at some of the things I've seen posted. Some people, I think, who have a sort of more visceral connection, who have family members who are in the area, they have certain reactions, and I don't love it. It's people are extremely emotional right now, and I'm not making excuses for anybody or whatnot, but again, like my project is to try and get as many people as I can to sort of understand the dynamic that is going on in Israel and in Palestine, and the idea of like, this Zionist project, maybe we need to take a look at it and be a little bit more skeptical about what fuels it. And that's not to mitigate the horror of what Hamas did, and it's certainly not to mitigate the horror of, it's not a mom or a dad does not care how you kill their baby or their kid. A kid does not care how their mother or father was killed. I mean, I obviously they care, but at the end, the pain is just as great. And I think, I've said this before because I've been talking about this conflict, in a professional setting for going on 20 years now. And I don't engage really, or I try not to, in the sort of who's more or less moral, whose killing is, more or less barbaric. Like in my experience, as soon as you start to engage in the sort of like who has the moral high ground in these arguments, all you get is what we have had for decades now. And
But I think framing the issue of, ending apartheid as a moral one is not. I agree with you on which killings are more immoral. I mean, you can't make that case. Like, I saw a video of someone taking down the missing person posters that people were putting up of Israelis that were taken hostage. I find that to be disgusting. Like, you can't make that. You can't engage in this in that way. And it's tribal and it's wrong. But in terms of the broader context of the issue, I think the issue of Palestinian liberation outside of the violence we're seeing right now is a moral one, right?
I mean,
I'd say it's a historical one. Like, I think we need to put this in the context of the broad history and the structures that we're seeing. And yeah, like, if ultimately, like, we make a conclusion about those structures saying this is immoral, but also look at what it's producing, which is these cycles of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't see a moral problem with it. I'm talking as a rhetorical tool to try and argue in this moment. But I think broadly speaking, the idea of apartheid, the idea of colonization, the idea of deprivation and whatnot are, moral precepts. But in terms of like trying to argue what should happen in the future, I assume a certain sort of like, I'm not going to argue with a guy who says they're animals and we should chew them up and, use them as, as fertilizer and talking about people essentially.
Right.
I mean, I'm not having arguments with those people. I'm having, I'm talking about engaging, and for the most part on this show, like there's two different modes in which we function. One, engaging people who are sort of like politically adjacent and trying to convince them. And, anybody who's going to be politically adjacent to the show, I think on some level, at the very least, thinks they believe that in the humanity of Palestinians. And I think sometimes, like, with the opportunity with those people, there's a way to point out, like, hey, maybe you need to examine that. I mean, you had an example before the show you were talking about where I think, like, sometimes, like, people can say,
I had a very, very, very difficult conversation with somebody close to me, and I had to say, you have to examine the way that you view Muslim people, and brown people more broadly. And just like to the question, sorry to cut you off, Sam, but about Sarah and other celebrities sharing this, what I think is really annoying, and you're not on like Instagram, so you don't see this as much, but the celebrities that are sympathetic to Palestinian liberation and what's going on in Gaza, I would say, are being told by all their PR teams to shut the hell up. Like the public voices right now, unfortunately, from some public figures, are pushing a good amount of Zionist propaganda. And then there's like a few celebrities like Gigi Hadid, who's Palestinian, who speaks out about it. But I guarantee very cautiously. And then the Israeli government's getting into a Twitter war with her, like insane people. But like just because people aren't speaking out right now doesn't mean that there isn't growing support and understanding of what's happening. People are terrified. They have PR teams that are telling them, don't say a thing, right? And what's annoying is that there seems to be very little consequences for completely reckless misinformation being spread by certain celebrities and other public figures about like what is actually happening in Gaza when it as long as it is supportive of Israel. But there's an entirely obvious, I would say, chilling effect of any Palestinian support, and like we just. Greta
Israel
Thunberg,
is tweeting about Greta Thunberg now because she had
said solidarity with Palestine. She had an autistic emotional support octopus plushie in the background of the photo, and there are like people saying that was an anti-Semitic symbol that she's secretly putting in there. We're talking like QAnon levels of derangement here, and the picking apart of anybody who wants to say something positive publicly about Palestine. That is, I mean, I printed this out too, that the Harvard students that are getting doxxed right now by for putting out that letter in support of Palestine, they're putting their faces on billboards, sending their information out to potential employers. They've had their job offers have been rescinded right now. Like this chilling effect is real. So my point is just that it feels very alone right now. I feel alone in many ways in certain conversations, but there are a lot of people that are sympathetic behind the scenes, but they're afraid to say something because of like your family members are going to get doxxed, or a right-wing group is going to put a photo up of you outside in Harvard Square where you go to college and call you anti-Semitic so all of your classmates can see. You know? So that's the situation right now.
I mean,
By the way, free speech warriors. Where's Barry Weiss? Where's Barry Weiss?
Taibbi's really upset
Where's Taibbi?
that people thought the hospital might have been bombed by Israel.
Where's Greenwald? Where's Charlie Kirk?
He's tweeting. At least to be fair, Greenwald's
okay,
tweeting
I'm
about
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I should.
But I mean, look, there's no doubt, and this is, I think, you know, when I was in Vegas, like I was saying, like, you know, within the first day, I knew the face. I could identify like 3 different IDF communications, people. They've been on TV so much, and it has always been. This has always been the case. It is. I mean. The interesting thing from my perspective is like this feels a lot less isolating than during the Iraq War era because there's just more dissent. I mean, it is there's more sort of like bloodlust and insanity in some respects because the Israeli government is even more right wing than it has ever been.
Yep.
And they don't even feel like they need to dress up what they're talking about, and they can be a lot more sort of like vicious. And frankly, there's a lot of settlers, both ethno-nationalists and religious fundamentalists, who are much more vicious. Which is not to say that this has not been an ongoing thing, but like there's no sense that they even feel like they have to hide their agenda or be quiet about it. But at the same time, I'm also hearing a lot more dissent about this than, you know, and it's not apples to oranges. I mean, it's not apples to apples. But I think there's, you know, I've been saying for years. Do you remember Indie Mike? We would have Matt remembers, but years ago I would have debates with this guy on like just the email thread with a bunch of people, and I was like, dude, if you're concerned about Israel, the biggest threat to Israel is what they are doing.
Exactly. They
are doing, and what it's going to do in this country, because it is just a matter of time in this country, and I still contend that it is. It is just a matter of time before there is a critical mass, and we see it with younger people, a critical mass who understands, who sees this conflict in a different perspective. You know, when I was 10, there was no reporting on the Deir Yassin massacre. There was no social media that was talking about what was happening in 1948. This is all
historians
stuff.
hadn't even got there in like in the 80s.
Exactly. And we had a version of the Dunning School in terms of the founding of Israel, and there was no sort of like, you didn't hear reporting about the Irgun or the Stern Gang as terrorist organizations. All you heard about was that Israel had been attacked by 6 different countries, and it was a big David and Goliath story, and things started to both change in the way that Israel approached that region, and also simultaneously a growing understanding of like how the country was founded. And the further you get away from that, and the further you get away, and there's more history about how that country was founded. And I don't believe that you can go backwards in that way any more than we can say like the United States should essentially not exist anymore.
We can't.
And we can't.
Israel exists and it will exist.
But the way in which that country deals with a greater understanding of that past and deals with the path forward, it's untenable. I mean, at the final analysis, it is untenable. And the question isn't, will there ever be a single country or a resolution to this? There will be at one point. It's just a question of how many people have to die and be immiserated between now and then. And it could be decades from now or not, but it's not. This is untenable. And by die, I'm not even just talking about within the context of the Palestinian population or the Israeli population. I mean, this has the potential to expand, and I sort of feel like we're at a much more tenuous point in that regard than we've ever been. But it's interesting. There was an era where it was like, if you're Arab, why don't the Arabs take them in? And we live in an era now where we understand like that is pretty offensive to say that because they're Arab, that you can expect a country to be like, well, we will take them in. Like, I don't know, like, would we ever say that about Ukraine? Like,
why do they have to be taken in?
Well,
but that's
my point is like
Jordan,
we would not. Yeah. But my point is like to get people to understand the sort of inhumanity of that talking point, which has been a talking point for my entire life. Would you say, why isn't Poland just taking in all the Ukrainians? They're all white. They're all Caucasians.
That's a good point.
Like, I mean, or they're all Christian. Like what? Like what?
Let Russia take the land. I mean, they could just go to Poland.
And I think like it has been just a, I think it was effective for a long time, but I think like there's a broadening understanding of our shared humanity, at least in some circles, and that's why we're starting to see this pushback and why we see this difference in the polling in terms of like the
young
way that people score.
Yeah. So hope we answered that. That I am.
Sam Sexy Beard. Sam and Emma. I just converted to Reconstructionist Judaism in March. I like Reconstructionism quite a bit, actually. It's a hard time for me as a leftist and now a new Jew. I'm feeling so conflicted about all of this. Do you think Israel would be safe if Hamas continues to be a dangerous element in Gaza? Well, I mean, I think definitionally, if Hamas is a dangerous element, then Israel is safety is imperiled. But the question becomes, after 75 years, what could Israel do differently than what it's been doing to make itself safe? And it seems to me that we have run the gamut. You put essentially 2 million people on a diet, literally. You give them less calories, less water, less electricity on a daily basis than anywhere else in the region. You have regular military incursions. You immiserate them. You steal their land in the West Bank. You make them go through multiple checkpoints. You get cancer treatment. It's going to take you 3 different, it's going to take you 4 hours to travel a mile. I mean, on and on. If it's 75 years of this has not made Israel safe, what you go in and you eliminate Hamas, and now you have the West Bank. There's no, the question isn't, will Israel be safe if Hamas exists? Israel has been an insecure place. It will be an insecure place. And it will take years to achieve this security. But the sooner you change the path that it's on, the sooner you change the path dependency, as it were, the sooner it will be safe. And that path dependency, and it may be, I think like ultimately, if you want a a safe haven for Jews, if that's the point, there's no reason to believe now that it would be any less safe 20 years from now if you shifted an approach and began to say, we're going to recognize the humanity of everyone living in this geographic, lines that we have drawn. And we're going to give everyone full citizenship. And, that was the idea of Zionism. It wasn't necessarily that it needs to have that it needs to be a Jewish theological country as much as a safe haven for Jews.
Chris Hitchens has an old clip that I think is pretty pithy where he says, there's a choice between a safe state for Jews and a Jewish state, and they chose the latter. And America is a safer state for Jews than Israel is.
I mean, that's the God's honest truth.
Yep.
And if that's the Zionism was not one thing when it started. It was not. There were people who thought they were going to create a socialist utopia in Israel, and one that would recognize the shared humanity of the people who were living there. And as often in these type of situations, other people in that coalition had other designs, and you got onto a trajectory that led us here. I mean, I was having conversation with people about this, 25 years ago, and they're like, the dream has died, but there was a dream, and now, like, not only did the dream die, but it takes a while for it to become real. That, like, look, it's not working. It's just not working. You cannot deny the humanity of people this long, this many, if you are that size of a country. I mean, I suppose you could do it if you were, if there was 70 million people there, you could suppress these people for a lot longer. I guess theoretically, although, one would like to think that there would be more dissent there, but it's just not working. So, I mean, and that's why, like, I feel like I don't have to engage in the who is more morally righteous in this situation argument. I don't find that, like, to be helpful. I have beliefs about it, and that my first order ideas, I think, are always, at least in my mind, I'm trying to do something that's more moral than others. But I think even the worst perpetrators of horrible things think that they're the ones who are morally righteous.
Right.
But what is quite clear is that if Israel exists as a safe haven for Jews, it has failed in that mission. It's 75 years now. And if the entire country is terrified to the point where they want to go in and slaughter thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, displace millions of people, that seems to me to be a fairly obvious failure of that project, at least the way it's been pursued.
The apartheid system, the immiseration of Palestinians, is a security threat to Israel. Like, it's not the conditions, the material conditions that are set up in this system, where it is the largest open air prison in the world. How is it possible? Just think about it logically, for there to be safety in those conditions for the people on the other side of the prison walls. I care about both sides of the wall. I care about the Palestinians and the Israelis. And it's never going to be when someone can peek over and see a first world country as 90% of the population has no clean water, as there's 50% youth unemployment, as it's one of the more most densely populated areas in the world and one of the poorest areas in the world. That is the breeding ground for radicalism outside of what we've talked about, which is the systematic boosting of Hamas by Israel, Netanyahu bragging about bolstering Hamas, not blocking Qatari funds going to Hamas because it's easier for him. Instead of, there being a long-term solution here, because he is ideologically fascist, he wants to have an excuse constantly to continue that immiseration and bombing of Palestinians. Hamas gives him that perfect excuse. And that's why they haven't gone away. So as we've been saying, the onus is on the more powerful actor here, and we all understand who that is in this instance. It's the one that has the backing of the United States and the entire West.
All right, let's take. Let's.
Want to do a clip?
Yeah, let's do. Let's turn to the speakership, folks. We're not going to get to time for phone calls, but we already took a bunch. We took 4 or 5 phone calls.
We did.
So
you're feeling guilty about it, and we literally did it.
We did it. We already did it. So here was Kevin McCarthy this morning. And I'm starting to wonder if, when I hear this, I'm starting to think Kevin McCarthy thinks that he's going to end up as speaker.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I honestly think that's what's going on here. I think this is like one of those sort of like, we're going to kill Jim Jordan with kindness. Here is Kevin McCarthy pretending that he wants Jim Jordan, not himself, to be Speaker of the House.
Will say, using their poll-tested phrases. But let me correct the record. Jim Jordan is an effective legislator.
I want to correct the record too. I want to make the record straight. I did not hit my soundboard. That was not me adding that laughter. It was literally the laughter of the Democratic lawmakers. And I will tell you, I suspect there is not a single Democratic lawmaker who wasn't sort of at least of 2 minds about Jim Jordan. They think he's a horrible person, but also realize, like, God, if we could run against this guy.
The target rich environment.
I mean, this is like, Republicans have always been very good about like Nancy Pelosi and San Francisco politics, right? Yeah. Gay. They tried it with Barack Obama. Yeah. They tried it with Barack Obama in Chicago politics, although everybody was just like, what are you talking about? Because I wasn't born in 1947.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what they were talking about as a Chicago politics at that point.
Although, have you heard about the man that says that he smoked crack with Obama and that they had sex? I mean,
But that's not Chicago politics. That's like San Francisco.
Well, I mean, it's all the same big city liberals.
But Chicago politics was supposed to be about its corruption.
Oh,
that
really?
existed.
See, I don't even know. That's the reaction.
Mayor Daley and stuff like that.
Exactly. That's my point. That's like Chicago politics. It has to do with the Kennedy election and how votes were bought and this and that. That's what they're talking about. And I'm like,
Democrats would like to win.
How are they deploying this? Nobody knows what they're talking about anymore. But to have a Jim Jordan, he's one of the more prominent, like, you want to motivate, your average sort of like semi-information voter, Jim Jordan or Marjorie Taylor Greene as Speaker of the House is exactly what you want.
Well, I have some breaking news for you. Jim Jordan has lost the secret ballot, according to Jake Sherman at
Wait, so there was a 4th vote?
Mm-hmm, like about less than a half
was
hour
this a
ago.
vote on the floor? No, it's
He's
not a
no
vote on the floor.
longer the
This is-
speaker designate for the House GOP.
So let's be clear. This is Kevin McCarthy this morning pushing Jim Jordan, knowing for a fact that he was going to lose the public vote on the House.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to ask yourself, why is this guy promoting Jim Jordan so much? Because he thinks that he is going to be the last man standing, and they're going to have to elect him again as Speaker of the House because they have no other option. And so he's basically trying to throw to everybody, you're great. You're great. I'm sorry, guys, that you couldn't get elected. Let's just listen to the rest of this.
Will say, using their poll-tested phrases. But let me correct the record. Jim Jordan is an effective legislator. To legislate is about more than the name on the bill. It's about reaching compromise and working long hours behind the scenes to get the job done.
The House will come to order.
Could everybody please stop laughing at Kevin McCarthy?
I like that. That's almost a little UK parliament-y, getting people
God.
a little riled up.
Totally.
So one better thing about UK politics is there's confrontation in the parliament.
It reminds me of the scene in Mad Men. Indulge me for a sec, when they're trying to get to make the Jaguar car dealer guy happy, the really despicable guy, and Don does a pitch to the executives about how you got to listen to him. We should do radio ads. Every Jim and Joe on off the side of the road buying discount Jaguars, and he's ostensibly making a pitch about what the Jaguar dealer guy wants, but he's really saying behind the scenes, underneath the smile, that, oh, you're going to make this a product very, cheap and
Pedestrian
gross,
in the way that you don't want it to be.
And so that's what he's doing there, saying knowingly false things about Jim Jordan. We can look up his legislative record. He is not an effective lawmaker by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, what's the total of bills he's gotten passed?
Zero. People are laughing at McCarthy because they know what McCarthy's doing.
Yeah.
And is just broken now that after losing the third vote, more than he lost the second vote, which was losing more than he lost on the first vote, they went back into their conference room, their chambers, essentially, and voted to basically not make him the nominee anymore. They call it the speaker designate, which is basically the nominee. And when he was the nominee, he could call for repeated votes. And people basically said, Jim, you're not... We would have rathered you'd step down from this, but I guess you won't. So we'll do a secret ballot and we're going to vote you out. And now they're just like, what are we going to do? If they vote to give McHenry the 15-day powers of full speaker, they're actually moving they're getting more Kevin McCarthy than Kevin McCarthy was. All of those guys are saying, Kevin McCarthy was is too corrupt and is bought by, McHenry is also a great target for Democrats, where it's this guy takes a lot of corporate money. Remember Eric Cantor? There's a reason why Eric Cantor lost to a guy named David Bratt, who's not even in the House anymore. 6 years ago, was it? 8 years ago? He was going to be the next speaker.
2014.
And he got taken out.
Yes, Cantor was,
2014.
Yeah. I guess it was 9 years ago. And he lost because he was so lathered up in lobbyist money. It was amazing. And I think Kevin McCarthy thinks he's going to come back in and somehow convince 4 or 5 of them that he can have the vote. Now, it depends on how many of those originally Matt Gaetz people vote. But can you imagine being one of those original 8 or 9? McCarthy's got to come back and give them something so that they can save face. Why did you just put the entire country through this if you were going to turn around and vote for McCarthy? And it's got to be because McCarthy's going to come in and says, well, I'll shut down the government. But they're just well, dude, we don't need you to shut down the government. We don't need anybody in office to shut down the government. Here is Charlie Kirk. And, Lord help me. This is probably going to be the last time I ever agree with Charlie Kirk on anything. But he stumbles on this, not in the way this is total broken clock right twice a day. The reason why this is happening is because Republicans have no agenda.
Yep.
They have no political agenda. It is really only, they have personal agendas, right? They want to gain power. I want to be, I want to make some money or whatever it is. To the extent that there's a political agenda, it is really just to have no government and allow their business interests to prosper, which ends up putting money back into their pocket. That is their governing agenda. So there is no incentive for them to fix government when it is dysfunctional because they have nothing they want to pass. This is why there is, regardless of whether you think Republicans and Democrats are exactly alike in terms of like their corporate fealty, there is a constituency within the Democratic Party that wants to do things. You could say it's neoliberal, and in many respects, you'd be right. You could say
sometimes it's labor though too,
and but sometimes it's labor. I'm just trying to sort of like make the stipulate as many of the facts as possible. There are people in the Democratic Party, as misguided as you may be in a position to think that they are at different times. I happen to think that like cutting poverty is a good thing, and we did that, and then we just let it go back because there were others who wanted to stop that agenda. But they want to go in and do things. They want to have a functioning EPA. They want a functioning FDA. They want a functioning IRS so that we can tax millionaires more. They want child tax credits. They want things. They want government to do things fundamentally. Even Biden has given up the rhetoric that we heard from Bill Clinton back in the day, like, government, we're going to make it lean and mean. Republicans do not. And Charlie Kirk just about gets there.
I am getting upset. And I don't want to sound whiny. I hate that. But it shouldn't be this hard. We work our tails off to try to get Republicans elected. And as the great Rush Limbaugh taught us, Republicans would rather be in the minority than have to govern with the majority. People are actually switching away from Jim Jordan now, according to our reports. We're still doing the tallying here. So Jim Jordan is losing ground. Jim Jordan is losing ground. We're going to get the names. It's still happening in real time. Do we have the picture-in-picture we could put up there? Somebody says here, Mike, Charlie, why can't Republicans unify behind the nominee the way the Democrats do? Why can't McCarthy make sure his name isn't voted for if it takes away votes from a nominated Republican? I have no answer to the second part. Republicans do not want to be in charge because it requires responsibility. They go to D.C. not to do things, many of them, but to be somebody. You have the little congressional pin. You have a little staff. You get to dress in ties. Some of these people are really sick narcissists. You get a nice photo. You get an office with your name on it. And you get told all these beautiful things about how great you are in constituent meetings and selfies money. And photos and portraits. You get to be important. And Congress is basically filled with student council narcissists that otherwise would not be able to succeed in the free market.
Okay, now.
So close.
Well, he's right about all of that stuff. He's also, in many respects, talking about himself.
Yeah.
But the other part that he's missing here is that there is no incentive. There is no urgency because they don't have any agenda. They don't have a political agenda that's not being served by what they're doing now.
Well, I mean, but if there was a Republican president, this wouldn't be happening. They would be trying to pass tax cuts so that the Republican president could sign it. That's the only job that they have to govern.
100%. But they could have passed those tax cuts like 6 months ago. I don't know that they would be having the same fight because the president would be there to have the political power to punish, the Matt Gaetz and this and that, and they would be inhibiting the actual doing of work on some, tax cuts. I mean, that was the only thing that Donald Trump passed during that time, although Congress also set up mechanisms for them to retain power and for the ability of the president to roll back stuff that other presidents did. But that's it. And so there's not the urgency for them to do anything. They don't shut down the government. A third of them would be like, okay, as long as there's no threat to my political power and my getting reelected, they're not incentivized because they have no agenda. They literally look at the Republican platform. The Republican platform, you cannot look at, on this issue, they this, on this issue, that. It literally is, in parentheses, see Donald Trump. Do we even have a document? Is there even a document that says Republican platform from that came out of the last convention? It was just
what Trump wants, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's read a couple IMs, then we'll get out of here. Salmon Crew, I'd like to ask you if the Discord may get a shofar for the illustrious Lux partner. Got the wonderful yet unsurprising news that she had passed the bar exam, and of course, I'd like to once more thank everyone for everyone hearing this for your continued vibes, love, and support. It means the world to me. Love you all. Left is best. Free Palestine. Hi, Bumbler. And I don't know who sent that, but wait, shofar. Jim Jordan's spine. Hey, Emma, Sam, I must say, listening to you over the last few days has converted me from an Israel apologist to a believer in Palestinian rights to live like humans.
That's so great to hear.
Like you changed my mind. I think you can bring a movement to demand better from the likes of Fetterman and so many more Dems who didn't stand up to support Rashida Tlaib. Why so less coverage of insensitive and honestly painful genocide supporting statements from Dems? Why should we focus more on Republicans' madness, which is honestly of no significance compared to the crisis in Gaza?
Well, I would say that we've covered Gaza exhaustively for our to our capabilities. We also have to cover domestic politics too, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think we were critical yesterday on the show of Fetterman.
Yeah, maybe we could have spent more time on that, but I thought we did talk about it.
But I, another person, Ro Khanna, he's getting criticized for not signing on to this ceasefire.
Lost a staffer.
Yeah, exactly. And
there's like something like 400 staffers have sent around a letter asking their bosses, essentially, on the Democratic side to
and
push more
Fetterman's
for a
chief of staff
ceasefire.
was mocking it on Twitter, so I responded to that guy. But I understand maybe we can think more like as the ceasefire. I mean, there are growing protests every single day for a ceasefire. This is becoming unignorable for anybody that considers them left of the center of the Democratic Party. It's got to grow to the center of the Democratic Party and eventually the conservative Democrats too, because this is untenable, obviously.
I mean, on some level too, understand we were talking about this when we were talking about AIPAC dumping money into races, whether it was Summer Lee's race or whether it was Levin's race in Michigan. I think they took him out, and a couple other races. We were talking about this in the run up to the 2022 elections. We were talking about this in the run up to the 2020 elections. Like, there's a certain amount of showing up after the house is burnt down. When AIPAC is coming in with all that money, this is what you get from the progressive politicians who would otherwise be speaking out more vociferously. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, it's a little bit, there needs to be popular sentiment that protects these people. That needs to exist first to push them in there. People have to stop thinking of politicians as these sort of moral repositories, or that they're these are people that you want to assess because you're gonna form some type of lifetime partnership with.
So vote for them. I always say vote for them for prom king or whatever.
They are levers.
Yeah.
And they are levers. Think of them as a lever.
And some are easy to pull them.
And they are on a spectrum like this. And it's hard to pull them in any direction. And some start out in the middle, some start off on towards, the right, and some start off towards the left a little bit. And you can pull them, and you need to grease the lever, and you're still going to have this, and you want to pull the ones that are closer to you further down. Stop thinking them as these sort of bastions of whatnot. From an electoral standpoint, I can understand why people go out there. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy you could have a beer with. Or that's all called electioneering. But when you're talking about convincing them of the right thing, that only happens with some of these sort of people who start off with these sort of I don't like gay people. And then, oh, my kid's gay. And then all of a sudden, like, I realize, like, I can't do this with my family. No, you're someone like Dick Cheney. You can still pull it off but that's not what's going on here. There's no pictures of crying babies in Gaza that is going to change a politician's position 99 out of 100 times if they're convinced some super PAC is going to dump $40 million in the next election and take them out if they take a specific position.
Yep.
And they're out there alone and their constituents. It's like, that's just.
So raise your voice, right? You've got to soften the landing for these politicians to speak out about this. I also just wanted to note that this is pretty important and nothing definitive yet, but the University of London's forensics team and Cobb Smith, who does war crimes and human rights violations investigations, also backed up a little bit by Eric Toller, the New York Times visual investigations reporter there. They've done an analysis of the hospital blast, and it's casting doubt on the claims that it could be an Israeli or a Palestinian rocket. They're saying that it's more consistent with the impact marks from an artillery shell that would be fired by the Israelis. Nothing definitive yet. Just wanted people to know and get an update on that since we covered some of the forensics of that yesterday.
I mean, like the hospital is a good example of, like, I think like it becomes a sort of a talking point to somehow like add justification to the bombing in Gaza. I mean,
yep.
One can stipulate that Hamas doesn't have the interests of the civilians in Gaza first and foremost in their head. You can stipulate that. But once you do, it becomes even more reprehensible what Israel is doing. Because if you say that Hamas does not represent Palestinians in Gaza, how can you possibly justify raining terror from the skies on all these people?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the sort of like the hospital thing becomes and I from the beginning, I have been unclear on who's responsible for it.
Yeah.
But we know Israel's
they've
history.
Bombed hospitals before. We know they've lied before.
Yes.
We know that Gaza has no electricity.
And we know the Hamas rockets misfire, and like the broader context is like have a ceasefire, and these sorts of environment won't be happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And but in the meantime, 16 people die in a church.
Yep.
Because it shares a wall with what is supposedly a Hamas facility. Supposedly. That's the charitable interpretation of all that. I mean, there's no, someone like saw somebody on Twitter saying like, it was only 100 civilians that died in the hospital. And it's like, you're
disgusting.
Are you even
Yeah.
Is this possibly a human being?
They're going my team. No. You misrepresented my team. My team actually is better than what you're saying. We're not.
That's my point about the whole sort of like getting into the moral, the moral scorecard in these disputes, because it's a distraction. It's a distraction. You're killing human beings are dying on both sides. There's no killing a child or an adult for that matter.
Telling a hospital
is not like you don't get points if you're morally justified in that context. And there is I think there's there's a material difference between civilians and military personnel. These civilians are not a threat to other civilians. Civilians on one side are not a threat to the civilians on the other side. And Israel definitely doesn't want to get into the, well, they elected Hamas 16 years ago. Well, there's supposedly more direct democracy in Israel. Like, if you want, like that's the thing. Is like it's a ridiculous game to get into.
And again, even if 100% of the civilians, including the little babies, voted for Hamas and said "rah rah Hamas," still a war crime. Still a war crime to collectively punish people.
All right.
248, by the way.
I was going to say, all right, 5 more of these. Catfish James. Hey, look, Jim Jordan fails to get the speakership again. Yes. We Natch Applet. Is this thing on? Yes. Militant apathy. Chesbro just pled out. I seem to remember an ex-cop from around that way telling you that she would use the Georgia RICO law 2 years ago. Militant apathy. Right again. Brandon Tartikoff. Does anybody recognize that name? Former head of NBC Entertainment, I think like in the 80s. Don't forget that Michael Flynn pled guilty in 2017. Powell is possibly such a crazy true believer that she may think she can sabotage the prosecution as a double agent. Possibly. Bobby Dog. Although, didn't Flynn get the pardon? I don't think Donald Trump.
Flynn did get the pardon.
I don't think you're going to be able to do that in a Georgia context. Bobby Dog, it's our job to focus on the safety of people living there and how they are subjected to the decision of these powers, not over-identifying them with the powers they're subjected to. So there's no need to defend Hamas. Palestinian people are always deserved better than this power arrangement. Same with Russia and Ukraine. The people are the priority. Tamer from the 5. Hope you all have a good weekend. I'm our crew. Try and find some calm and resolve after this horrific fortnight here in Ontario, Canada. Hamilton MPP Sarah Jama has just served a cease and desist with the possibility of suing Premier Doug Ford over the comments amid branding her an anti-Semite for her pro-Palestine ex-posts, which included several disgusting false analogies not worth repeating. Meanwhile, his party has also put forth a motion in the Ontario legislature to permanently censure her in the House. I can't read the rest of that, but Akros Slaflute. Can we go back to just asking him what his McDonald's order was for lunch, please? And the final I am of what was that reference to?
I think Trump, Good question, though. It's funny either way.
Kowalski. Howdy, I'm a Majority Report. Can I get a whoopsie from the soundboard for my 30th birthday tomorrow?
Kowalski.
Is
no
it like
way.
30?
No way. Really?
I knew that. I always thought it was weird he was so young, but I didn't know that.
He's still so young.
Wow.
All right, Matt.
I guess I assumed he was older because when I shook his
Matt.
hand, he had the hands of a farmer. Oh, whoopsie. We need the whoopsie.
He asked for a whoopsie.
Oh, yeah. He had such calloused hands. I must have thought he was... Oh, dang.
Whoopsie.
Wait, I have it on my Instagram. Hold on. Sorry, someone tagged me in something. And
Maybe I'll give you
wait,
one.
I have it here.
I'll give you, how about this? Whoopsie. There's a picture of me in a beanie.
Okay, hold on.
Real conversation, and what do? You just for neo-Nazis. This is why you guys don't get invited places, because you're not having real conversations.
I don't really care about getting invited places.
Yeah, right. So go live in your grifter echo chamber where you guys can play songs with bad audio and then say, whoopsie.
There you go.
I forgot.
He was so mad.
Forgot the context of that. Oh my God.
That's my friend. I'm as a fellow beanie wearer.
Yes, I
let's not
guess.
Make fun of Tim.
Whoopsie.
A grifter echo chamber.
Play songs with bad audio. And then say whoopsie, because that's what we do.
Whoopsie.
Congratulations on the 30th.
I'm gonna look up how Tim's
reaching
been
your
navigating
30th.
the last couple of weeks. Actually, I've kind of
Well,
lost track.
we did play a little of him on PBD where he still was like, I don't know enough about it.
Maybe he's educated himself.
I mean,
Time to read a book.
he's more anti-war than me, so.
Whoopsie. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job this week. Great job. Dorsey. John Aaron's been booking. It's been a very tough environment to book in, obviously. Figure out what we're going to be doing on that. Maria and Chris, Isaac, Great job this week. See you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I